a lot of people talk about like, oh, I don't want to label my child, I don't want to label them, I don't want to label them or mislabel them or whatever. And I don't want people to look at me funny because my child has this scary label. It's not that scary.
No.
And all it does is help them access things that they need.
Welcome to Fika's Focus. Voices leading change.
All right. Kia ora Tkeyah.
Hello.
We are excited to have you today. Tkeyah's actually been with us for a long time, since a long time, eh?
3 years?
Yeah,
3 years?
yeah. Bit of a holiday in between there, but we have been lucky to have Tkeyah as part of our chefing team in that space. But in that time as well, we were lucky to have Theo. Theo was with us. He was, what is he, 2?
He was 2.
Yeah.
He was just over 2
Yep.
when he started at Pat Beach, yeah.
And we have been through a pretty awesome and clunky ride in that space for Theo, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk through that and what you've learned as a mum, and as also being in a part of the team as well.
Yeah.
I think is quite a unique space in that support space.
It's been a unique role,
Yeah.
playing parent and staff.
Yes. So Theo, what's his official diagnosis?
So he was diagnosed in October. So that's how long it took. I guess it did take quite some time between everyone noticing
Yes.
those small things to diagnosis. I think it was about 2 years.
Yep.
And that was through, obviously, the Ministry of Health with the Ministry of Education's input as well, a lot of input from the Ministry of Education. So he was officially diagnosed with autism in October and a significant speech delay.
Yes.
Which I guess the two kind of go hand in hand, because there are a lot of instances in children with autism where
Yes.
they have significant speech delays,
Yep.
or they have significant speech regressions, which then progress into a speech delay.
Right.
I think getting that diagnosis wasn't really the defining point for us, because I feel like as a unit, everyone kind of knew already.
Yep.
It was just kind of that stepping stone into getting that help. And because without those forms of diagnoses and stuff, you don't access that help.
Which is quite wild.
It's a huge problem.
Because Theo, he still looks and behaves like a typical child.
Yeah.
This kid is one of the most physically strong kids I've ever seen and met. Like, I have seen him run up and bowl over Armin from behind. Like, he is physically very, very strong. He can scale fences like that, and which is quite funny, because I don't know if I've told you this, but my parents had to put chicken wire around the fences so I couldn't climb them. Yeah, because I was like there, like, they'd just get a call from the school. Raymond's down at the school again, when I wasn't even at school, because I would just scale and get out. And, like any typical child, he gets obsessed with things. I get obsessed with things. There's a lot of that goes on in that space. However, we also know and recognise that we needed to support him in many ways. And that's been part of the journey.
Yeah, and it's been a huge journey, and I definitely think without the support from the kākua that he had prior to school, I don't think that transition to school would have been as good as it was. Because all we wanted to do for him really was set him up for success. Yeah, and at some points that looked really difficult. Especially with the certain help that we could only access through the likes of early intervention and the Ministry of Education. And although their input was really valuable and I really appreciated it, I definitely think that it probably could have happened a lot earlier.
So who has the ability to diagnose the actual official diagnosis?
Ministry of Health.
Yes.
So the paediatricians and the child psychology team. So it is the Child Disability Services. They are the ones that diagnose them, that diagnose anyone really.
Yes.
I think it's up until the age of like 13 maybe, and then they move on to obviously like the adolescent side of things.
So, and we started a process, but it's a long time. But when you just look at that purely, it's a numbers game here as well, because there's just how many child psychs do we know? You know, it's it's a very
Well, from when Future Focus put that forward to early intervention that they required assistance for him, I think it was about a year and a half before we actually saw anyone. So from referring him, from like our team referring him to actually being seen by someone in the Ministry of Education, he went from being 3 to suddenly he was 4 before he saw, 4 and 3 months or whatever it was before he actually saw anyone. And my, I guess, biggest pet peeve about it was it's called early intervention for a reason. And so if it's going to be called early intervention, it needs to happen as early as possible.
Yes.
And I understand that, they are understaffed and probably underfunded as well. But what ends up happening, and I'm very thankful it didn't happen with Theo, but a lot of those kids fall through the cracks. And then they end up going to school without the necessary help, understanding, support that they need. And then that extends into the classroom and disrupts the classroom, which then, puts a lot of pressure on teachers. And it's not fair on anyone involved. It's not fair on the teachers that are in the classroom trying to teach a class. It's not fair on the children who have been thrown into school without a lick of support from anyone because they either didn't meet requirements for things like early intervention, any form of diagnosis or anything like that, whereas a lot of those kids probably could benefit and they would benefit from a lot of that support.
The reality is, early childhood is, we are having, do you know that I saw, it was in the Salvation Army report that came out on the State of the Nation, it is a massive number of children are engaged in early childhood. 93% or something.
Yeah.
Right? 93%. Now, of the 93%, we have now a major opportunity to set these children up for success at school day one.
Yeah.
Now, I'm privileged in my career in the fact that I worked in primary schools as well.
Yeah.
And I worked in new entrants.
Yeah.
And I saw kids who probably could have come through with far more support behind them, but because they either A, weren't engaged in early childhood, or B, the early childhood sector wasn't at that point of getting support. Because let's be honest, sometimes as an early childhood sector, I feel like we're the poor cousins of the education spaces. If we, and this is why we fight so hard for it, because we want Theo and whoever, Theo et al., to go in day one with support.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah.
Because I know if you get them in and there's no diagnosis, this is the first thing that happens. It takes a long time to get that. We've already explained it's 1 year.
Harder to get it once they're already at school. To get any form of help once they're already at school, it is far easier to actually get it prior to them starting. Things like the hoops we had to jump through to get him the AWS funding, which is for his teacher aid. I think once the paperwork was sent off, it took 2 weeks to get a response. And they have quite a nitpicky criteria on whether or not, and because of his language and communication and his socials, he met those criteria at a high needs because he can't speak. But for a child that's struggling in other aspects, it might not necessarily be speech or social. It might be in other areas like behaviour or general sensitivities. They
are
might
a big
not
one.
Meet those criteria, even though they need them.
Yeah, massive level of overwhelming anxiety, outbursts, not eating.
Yeah, not eating or not being able to toilet themselves.
Toileting's a big one.
Take care of
pressure.
In general.
Yep. And those are signs that we're attuned to. But interestingly, certain things have different gauges of, the first one being if they're violent, they'll get help.
Yeah.
But a lot of autistic, majority in fact that I have worked with, they're not violent.
No.
Yeah,
And that's a big thing that I've actually had a lot of people mention that to me, like, is he quite violent? And I'm like, no, he's not violent. He just struggles to regulate his emotions in the same way. And
that's got children. Adults
do. Children to a T. There's adults. His version of regulating his emotions is just really heightened, and so it does take a little bit longer to pull him back from that brink of absolute explosion. But that's most kids to a T. But a lot of people, I think there's a lot of assumptions around autism, because autism is so broad, and that's what I've discovered over the last kind of year, is that neurodiversity is huge. Autism's just one small little word that's just kind of popped at the top. And
Well,
it's like
I like it like this. It's like burgers.
Yeah.
Right?
How many different kinds of burgers are there?
Where can I get burgers from? What flavours? There's chicken, there's, and I love burgers. But do you know what I mean? That's the kind of, that's the way you look at it.
Yeah.
We can say burgers, and then you've got to think there's a diversity and a spectrum, and and in that scenario, what we also got to say is not everyone likes every single burger.
No.
Right? Most people have a very particular burger,
Yeah.
and they'll even have a particular burger where they buy it from.
Yeah.
That's the diverse needs. That's the ability. It's if you're a parent and you're trying to now these days, you got to sometimes make 3 meals at night to appease your children, to cater to your children. But that's the equation we're constantly fighting with, and there shouldn't be a fight.
No.
But in that scenario, it is important and critical that I talked about it with Gala, but it's the ecosystem around the child. It is, obviously we had you and Dills on board, and Zeke, but we had you guys on board, the centres on board.
Yeah. And that was huge.
Yes, that is the big one.
That was huge, because that is where we spent majority of our time.
Well, the attitude of a centre can really damage what can happen. It can damage and slow down. It can absolutely pilfer the process of success and actually stymie the flow and speed if the attitude is like, the parents don't do that. Ministry, like that.
The parents is a huge one, because I myself have spoken to parents while I was in this that have had concerns about their kids, and they've asked me about Theo. And I've said to them, you have to come to a level of acceptance.
Yes. So let's explore that, Tkeyah, because that level of acceptance. What were you and you and Dills? What did that look like?
I think for me, because I have an older child who is what they would call typically developed. He's a very
atypical,
very typically developed child.
Typical Kiwi kid.
And he, met all those milestones, but then again, so did Theo until a point. So when I looked at his, they've asked me a lot about from pregnancy right up until now, was his birth normal, anything irregular, was any of those milestones in that first year, were any of those out of character? No. And I couldn't fault him up until probably, it would have been about 1.5, where I started noticing small little differences in the typical development, certain things he did differently to Zeke. And so I think for a while I knew that there was something different. Not necessarily.
But then he had remember the ears.
And then he had the ears, and we always thought maybe it's because he can't hear, or and that's where because you went
reality,
to ENT, he started talking normally, and I didn't remember it because I feel like it happened so rapidly. But he started using sentences and all the typical stuff, and then it just stopped.
Regressed, yeah.
And I do remember actually saying to a lot of doctors, is this normal? He's lost a lot of his language, and it's a constant battle of he's only 2, he'll get there. He's only 3, he'll get there. And so I think my level of acceptance came quite a long time ago, where I started to realise that there was something different about him. Not necessarily anything wrong, but just different. His thought processes were different. The way he did things
Well, you had
was
Zeki to
different.
compare to.
Yeah, so,
right?
and I never like to compare my kids, but in this instance, I did look at the way Ezekiel communicated with other children, played with other children, and I could see those huge, vast differences. You know, even if there was a really loud noise from a very young age, it was straight hands over his ears and he would cry.
Yes.
Like, not just get a fright, like it was really, and that's when at the time I didn't know about, like, you know, sensory issues and those sensory overstimulations and stuff like that. So that level of acceptance for me, I think, came quite easy because I had my own suspicions, I guess, but I didn't know what it was. So I knew that there was something going on, and when people started mentioning things, like, you know, the EMTs mentioned autism, that was when it started to kind of, that snowball, I guess, into getting him referred, because at the time we thought maybe he had something wrong with his ears and that's why he was so sensitive to sound. And so we went through the ENT
And I mean, and it was still a big change,
you know. A huge change
he wasn't sleeping properly.
No,
you know,
sick.
he was very sick, always getting his nose, and he was always getting ear infections, like wild.
Yeah, it was every
and it
couple
was
of
having
weeks,
a
actually.
major effect on his sleep.
And so luckily, like, those ear infections kind of pushed us into making those decisions to like get all that stuff, to get his hearing checked, get his ears checked, to make sure, to rule out, I guess, and it had an outcome, and it really did help.
Yes.
But that was just one factor into it that kind of has played a part. It's played a huge part.
Yeah.
I reckon.
So let's fast forward into, well, let's celebrate Theo in some ways that we really want to. Like I said, this kid is mega strong. Like, like I said,
you can't fault him on the physicals.
Seen him thump Armin. Armin's not a greatly big guy, but I've seen him absolutely flatten him. But let's celebrate some of Theo's real unique qualities.
He has a way of communicating, so
he loves an ice block.
So he can communicate whatever he needs to without actually saying really anything, which I think is quite cool, because I think not having that voice has kind of given him another form of voice.
Of course.
Because he can get across what he needs to without actually saying a word, which I think is quite cool, to be fair. And the physical side of thing, like you said, I can't fault him on that.
And he loves his own space and time too. You know, I with Terrace Views having a larger area, it was nice to see him just go into his own space, and because where a lot of issues happen with other children, it's because they're children. That the personal space is not a thing.
Yeah, well, they're still learning about personal space.
You know,
all kids are, you know, in that 0 to 5 are all learning about personal space, and it's not something.
He just likes his own.
If
he was engaged doing something, you know, he just, that was what he wanted to do. And I always saw him. I liked it because actually my Nunu's like that, you know, when she's in her own space and time and she just wants to do that. But that's a real admirable trait because it's a high level of concentration going on there.
And like, he does get focused on things, and it is, you know, hard sometimes when you've got so many other kids around and they're like, well, I want to join in and play.
He's building something or doing Play-Doh.
And, you know, sometimes he did invite people into his space, but a good majority of the time.
But that was progression.
Yeah, that was
very big progression.
Over, I think it was a good 6 months before he kind of felt comfortable enough in not just the space, but around the kids. And the teachers to let them into his little bubble. Because if the bro doesn't like you, he doesn't like you. He's very, very, very picky on his people. I definitely think that's actually been a huge progression, though, because he is definitely more accepting of new people now, whereas in the beginning it was, if I don't like you, I don't like you. Whereas
neurologically,
he's kind of,
that's quite fascinating, really, neurologically and emotionally. I mean, I don't know, because he was like,
I definitely think he's like it's definitely, he can almost read the vibe of a person and whether or not they're going to be able to get on his level, because he does. He's very much his own. How do I explain it? Like, it's very him focused. So if he wants you to join in, like, he'll find a way to get you to join in.
I've seen
but
him.
if he doesn't want you to join in, he makes it very clear.
Yeah, I've seen him again, like dragging Armin or pulling people.
Aliana.
Pulling them in because that's what he wants, and that's him communicating.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of someone going.
Yeah.
It's the same scenario of a child, and he's actually
huge. For
isn't it cool
him?
that he's constructed his own ways of doing that? And now he's out at Fairhaven. It's out at school, and you, which I really admire. You decided, look, I need to probably step back from work for this. Yeah. And you're still doing some work with us, which we love, but you step back into that space. So just talk us through what was your kind of thought process there in his transition into school. What were you trying to do and be and achieve there?
Well, honestly, without the support, I guess, of the team and even like Ash, like my centre manager, they supported me with whatever I needed to do. So we, sat down and actually made that plan of how are his school visits going to look like, how many are we going to do? And they gave me the option of doing pretty much as many as I needed. And I love Fairhaven because they have such an amazing transition to school program.
Yes.
It's called Fairhaven Fours, so it's every single week for, I think it was an hour and a half in the mornings, for 10 weeks. And from, pretty much every single child will do that. And they gave me the option. So we started talking about school, because he went to school in term 4 of 23. And we started talking with the school in February.
Yeah, you're right.
So term 1. So we started
right.
making those plans as early as possible, so that we had so much time for planning and just to see how he responded. And that was really cool because they gave me the option of starting the Fairhaven Fours in term 2 so that we could do term 2, term 3, so almost 20 sessions. They were giving us the option of doing before, which is huge.
We've got to shout that out. I mean,
I think most schools it's an average of like maybe 2 to 3.
Well, yeah, I've heard of 5.
Yeah.
But that's... See, we want to be proactive and take kids across ourselves as well. But let's just break that down so that it's like 20, which is 2 terms, 20 weeks, which is 2 terms. And I want to shout that out because that's just, that shows phenomenal curiosity, empathy and care into Theo's success. Yeah. But also, and this is where I knew he was going to achieve, because I walked in one day and I can't remember the teachers' names. I met them. 2 of them were in there with Theo at TV. And here's Theo sitting on one of them's lap.
Yeah, I think it was Vicky.
Vicky, yes.
She's not there. She's no longer there anymore, unfortunately. She's actually now the principal at Arataki.
Oh, yeah, I did hear that, yeah. But
which is great.
that...
It was her, it was Vicky, Liz, who was the Senko out there, and Miss Patterson, who is this teacher now.
Right.
And she is the head of that initiative for kids. And it works. Well, really works.
Just discussing what we just said before. Yeah. Theo's he's picky. He's getting better.
Yeah.
To see him sitting on this adult's lap,
brand new adult's lap,
and just engaged and actually, it was. I went back out. I remember walking back out to Ash and be like, the bro's going to be sweet. Like look at him, and in that setting there, Fairhaven need a huge shout out because. Yeah. What they've done probably for many other children, but we can the factual space we have is for Theo. We are, because we're talking about this with Gala. He has a right, and schools have a responsibility to give him access to the curriculum that every other child has. And when I saw that in action, I was like, far out. This is a fantastic school and probably well led.
Yeah, and it is, and they've always been, because I've had, my other child has been there for 3 years now. Like he's in year 4, and I can't fault them. They have been a huge part in setting Theo up for that successful start to school. Because I was really nervous about it. Because just the thought of because he at the centre, I could see him. he was safe,
Yep.
he was being well cared for.
Yep.
I could see all of that. So, the thought process behind sending him to school, the thought process between sending my oldest son to school, which was,
Yep.
you get it,
Yep. See you
you're
later.
fine,
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
And then sending Theo to school was worlds apart. Like, I don't even think I was that nervous sending my very first child to school as I was for Theo, because then it wasn't that I didn't trust anyone, but I think there was definitely actually a little bit of trust involved. But was he going to be cared for properly? Were people going to understand him, and not just understand him language wise, but understand him as a person, and respect the way he thinks and plays, and all of those things are really nerve-wracking when you have a child that has such diverse needs. And it's a scary thought process to go through, but they made the transition really amazing, and my team, his preschool team, made that process really.
But it's again,
easy.
I always emphasise this: the ecosystem around a child needs to be on.
Everyone needs to
Centre,
be on board.
parent, ministry, and as much as we do moan about the ministry and spaces, they do step in when we really need them. Once and we're really fortunate because we've built really strong relationships with our ministry. Sarah and them. Sure, they're overworked and probably underpaid, but in that scenario there for Theo and for other children within our teams and organisation, they have stepped in at the time when we really did need them, and we badger them. And I think.
But
I think that's the other thing. Yes,
we need to advocate.
I think that's the other thing is where I'm really proud of our teams. We don't give up.
No.
We don't accept no. We don't accept we don't have time. Oh, we don't accept there's not funding. We don't. We just don't. Because
I think everyone needs to be on that kind of relentless advocating page as well, and that goes back to acceptance. Like like I said, the parents need to be on board. The centre needs to be on board. This potential school that the child is going to needs to be on board. And if everyone's on the same page and we're all fighting for the same thing, the end goal is amazing.
Yes.
Because I think if one of those three things was off, like, if the ministry input was off, or mine at Dylan's input was off, or the centre's
not
input was
accepting
off.
of it.
No, if I wasn't accepting of it, if the centre wasn't, as helpful as they had been, I don't
and they don't carry
yeah.
positive attitudes towards Theo or things. That's the thing.
Or, retaining the information that they're getting from early intervention. If they were just
how to support
if
them.
they were just like, oh yeah, cool, well, we might do that, or we might not. I think if any one of those things is off, it's just not
It
gonna.
just
it just falls apart.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that's why his transition to school was so successful, because I do think about it a lot, how easy and great it actually ended up being. Because for a time, I wasn't actually expecting it. I was expecting it to be horrible. And that I was going to be getting phone calls every day, that I have to go get him. But because of the setup that he was given by all of those people involved, he slipped into that school role. From day one.
Yeah.
And, the school found him a teacher aide that was right on his level. And I think that really helps too. But without all the input from the teachers and, me and Dylan, he might not have got that AWS funding. Had not,
and then you're battling away for a year, and
trying to get him,
and you lose a year, and then unfortunately stigma jumps onto a child, whether adults like it or not. But he's difficult. He's naughty.
He's too much.
He's too much. We can't handle him. He can only be here at this amount of time. I've seen it. I've seen it snowball, and it's part of the reason why we are as an organisation so passionate about getting it nailed while they're with us. So that when they go into school, that's it. It's done. They walk in day one with support, and because I don't want any more time wasted.
No.
And we get insight into it. We get massive insight into it. So
and that's where a lot of those early intervention. If the teachers are noticing things about a child, having that conversation with mum and dad, because mum and dad may have noticed the same things, but they're too scared to bring it up, because there is a lot of hesitation. A lot of people talk about I don't want to label my child, I don't want to label them or mislabel them or whatever, and I don't want people to look at me funny because my child has this scary label. it's not that scary.
No.
And all it does is help them access things that they need. Because all I want for Theo at the
That
end
they're
of the
entitled
day,
to.
Yeah, they are entitled to.
They're entitled to.
Yeah.
They're not accessing anything different.
No.
They're
And
just
it's not,
entitled.
Yeah, it's not special or anything. It's what they're entitled to help them.
We'll put it this way. If there's a child in a wheelchair and we didn't build access for them to get in the room, a ramp, right? You get hauled over the coals.
Yeah.
And rightly so. Yeah. Because we want the child to go inside when it's raining. Yeah. Right? For a starter.
Yeah.
But in that sense where it's not physical, it's something, that you can't see, touch, in that space, the fight becomes harder. But the reality is these children are absolutely entitled to access everything that everyone else accesses.
Yeah, and there's nothing to fix. They're not broken.
No.
They
just are.
They are just who they are. And that was where it comes back to acceptance. I had to just accept that some days we're going to be really rough and some days we're going to be amazing.
But again, that's not unique.
No, and that's parenting.
There are days with my children where it's awesome, and then there are days where it's like no, it's like there are just some days she just doesn't want to go to school, and you know what? It's not many, but when she's like that, I don't even fight it. I'm just like, all right, babe.
Yeah.
We'll stay home today.
Yeah.
You tell me what's up. Oh no. Then tomorrow you got to go to school. Yep.
And that was where me,
kids.
taking a step back from my role actually in centre really helped, because if he was having a rough day, I had that option of going, okay, well, you can just stay home with me today. And, when he was getting really tired in the afternoon and really overstimulated to the point where he just didn't want a bar of anything, we spoke about maybe this term we can shorten his hours so he's spending less time here, but the time he is spending here is quality time.
Yeah.
Keeping it positive and keeping everyone, happy, so that he doesn't think about school as being, this place that I'm trapped. And me not actively working in any of the centres really helped with that, because it meant that I could support him without, letting work down or letting anyone else down. All I had to focus on was him. And that was huge for me, because I didn't want to, be still working, having the school calling and going, you need to come get him because he's losing the plot.
Yeah.
And then I'm leaving work every second day, and I just wanted that time that he entered, the school life, I guess, to just be as calm and as unhurried as possible. Because it meant in the mornings I just got to spend that little bit of extra time prepping him for school without rushing around, because that rush is hard when you have kids.
Yes, it is.
And it just feels like you're constantly on the back burner trying to and I don't want to rush him. No. Especially not with that, trying to keep everything positive. Rushing the kids out the door, isn't.
Well, that's why the Māori word or translation for autism is Takiwātanga, which is in their own time.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful, it is such a beautiful translation of what autism is. In our own space and own time. And it's such a beautiful capture of what it actually represents.
And
it's actually, there's actually no deficit to that name. There's, there's no stigma attached to it.
No.
And I actually love that about the whole scenario, because quite frankly, that every child has that. They do have their own, and you talk about the rush in the morning, but you don't want to put, if you can, don't want to put any pressure on children. I'm lucky my children are up sparrow fart in the morning every day, so that's all good, but so are we. But in that space, what you're talking to, you can set your child up for failure every single day if you're battling in that space. And I admire what you and Dylan have done in that space. I was proud of you when you're like, no, I'm going to step back and this is what I've got to do. And I'm proud to be part of a team that can really support that, because you've been a big part of our team and still are. In my I guess own mind, I thought it's not going to be forever. Yes.
And if I take a step back, I have the opportunity to take that step back now for as long or as little as I need, and there's always going to be time for me to work. Yeah. But in his instance,
you don't get to restart school again.
I don't get to restart. I don't get to restart anything that I do with my kids, and no one does. Once that time's gone, it's gone. So I want to make sure that if I can put as much positive impact into the start of school, hopefully it sets him up for the rest of his school life, because there's still a long time to go.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
if this, first year or two can be really positive and really amazing for him, and he can get the support and help and stuff that he needs, hopefully that'll set him up long term. If I didn't get to spend that, extra 5-10 minutes in the morning saying goodbye to him, letting him know what's going on, like what kind of impact would that have on him? Because there is a lack of understanding on their part. What does he actually understand about what's going on? And that was huge
The
for
things
me.
we take for granted.
Yeah, the things we take
it's
for
like
granted.
day-to-day school, but also like athletics day, school swimming sports.
He's probably
cultural
what's
events.
athletics day?
What the heck's going on,
Yeah.
Matariki, all these things, the whole change in the routine can really
you're
throw.
right. Like there's a lot of things about like our thought process, or like even Zeke's thought process. He understands everything, and it left me wondering, what do you actually understand about what's going on? Like, do you understand what daycare is? Do you understand what school is? Like, do you understand what happens when we go to the supermarket, or are you just, absorbing as you're going? And so, I wanted to spend that time saying, letting him know that I was leaving for the day and he was going to have a really good day. And I think if I had been working at the time, that would have been, okay, baby, mummy's got to go now, bye.
Yeah.
Straight out the school gate.
And you're setting yourself up for some major hurt and failure.
And just, him feeling like I've just abandoned him at school because I don't know what he understands.
Yes.
So that's been really helpful. And, like the team were really supportive when I told them why I was leaving.
Yeah.
And they all totally got it because they know Theo and they know he needs that extra little bit of time and that little bit of just extra, I guess, love and care and just stopping and letting him absorb the moment before he goes, yeah, cool, you can go now.
Well, Tkeyah, we really are proud of Theo and obviously for yourself and Dylan and Zeke as well, and this support network and your wider support network. Obviously we get to see Eden and Mason, all them, and I know you guys are all close and things, but we really appreciate your candidness around this. We want to help families understand that yes, it is a journey. We've got to be rigorous, and we've got to be that squeaky wheel. We have to really advocate for children, and we just we've got to get together as a team and work towards the common goal and theme, which is absolutely everything they're entitled to as a human, and we really. Our journey with Theo has taught us some very, very valuable lessons, which we will carry into the future. But we are very proud of Theo and his success.
Oh, honestly, like the Future Focus team, like especially Terrace Views, like they were like my rock, and getting him where he needed to be, because they were all so supportive of everything that was going on, and just the care. The love and the care.
The love and the care.
For him especially. I definitely think that there was a big part of that team that helped him actually start accepting new people on the whole.
Agreed.
Because they did really love him.
Well,
he
even
did
accepted
really,
Eliana. He accepted Eliana.
Yeah.
That's a big
And
statement.
Armin. Armin from day one, that blew my mind because I was like, who are you?
Yeah.
Like, who is this
He
kid?
loved Armin.
He loved Armin. He adored Armin. But I think that those kinds of relationships really did set him up for those to being able to kind of breach that wall for making new relationships because, from day one, the relationship he formed with his teacher aide has just bloomed. But, that probably wouldn't have happened had he not had those people
The
just
exposure.
Exposure to that kind of
to
thing.
that love care, just a deep care for him and his uniqueness and every child's uniqueness. But well, thank you, Tkeyah. We really appreciate the kōrero about our little mate, and we admire your work in that space. So, thank you very much.